I'm the co-chairman of the SSA Clubs and Chapters Committee, and I was specifically tasked with increasing the use of Condor simulators in SSA clubs. I joined the SSA in 1967. I sold it in a 222 in 1969. Joined the Chicago Glider Club in 1987. I've been flying contests since 1998. I am also a tow pilot, an A&P mechanic, and a Condor skeptic until very recently. This shot shows a Condor 2 simulator on my home computer. We'll talk more about that later. So why is the SSA promoting the use of Condor 2 in simulators? 2/3 of the SSA clubs who responded to a survey early in 2023 indicated that they did not have enough CFIGs. It has been shown that the use of Condor simulators can reduce the time required to train students, as reported by clubs who successfully instruct with Condor, and also reported by the cadets at the U.S. Air Force Academy. If you're interested in hearing more of those stories, you can Google it and you will find plenty of clubs that have a very good track record of using Condor. But unfortunately, some clubs have had Condor available that didn't get used. And we'll talk about that more later. My club was one of those, and I've talked to a number of others who have it available and choose not to use it. But putting a CFIG in a simulator that feels like a glider cockpit seems to make them more open to consider Condor as a true instructional tool. So that's what the SSA is trying to do, to encourage clubs to give Condor simulation a serious try, or to upgrade their current Condor equipment to a sit-in simulator. The SSA has committed $50,000 to a 50-50 matching fund initiative, up to $2,500 per club. The details have been published online and in Soaring magazine. And in fact, here's the inside front cover of September Soaring magazine. At the moment, 12 clubs have been approved for matching fund grants, but there is still funds available.
Hi, I'm Mike Greenwald. We're here to promote the use of simulators and the Condor system for flight training and proficiency. But first, I'd like to give you a quick summary of my qualifications as a CFIG. I've been flying for more than 70 years with commercial and instructor ratings in single and multi-engine aircraft, seaplanes, gliders, and helicopters for most of those years. In gliders, I've flown several dozen contests and a great many cross-country flights. I own and fly an ASH-31MI. Next screen. My introduction to modern sophisticated simulators came when I first qualified in turbine aircraft and the annual refreshers that I took thereafter. Later, I purchased and used an Elite brand of multi-engine VFR, IFR simulator at home, and some years later added the X-plane system. Lately, I've added Condor, which is the best system for gliders. There are other systems that work on gliders. They don't come close. Our goal here is to produce better pilots. By better pilots, we mean better decision-making skills and better risk management. Go ahead. Okay. We want pilots to go out into the world knowing not just the right way to handle the many tasks involved in flying, but we want them to understand thoroughly the why, the reasons behind the recommended manner of doing things. If a pilot knows the reasons we do things, then when new situations arise, he or she will be better prepared to make a safe and practical decision. This is a desktop system. This is the one that exists in the Chicago Glider Club desk. It's been there for years. It looks like a toy, and because it looks like a toy, it's been treated like a toy, not like the serious training program that Condor is and can continue to be. This is a pilot's eye view of our new realistic view of simulation for the glider. This is actually Don Crush's development or additional development of the system that belongs to the Soaring Society of America. This is a serious training tool, not a toy. Simulators are used for both currency and for type ratings by all major US airlines. The pilot's first takeoff in the real aircraft is generally with hundreds of passengers behind them. Simulators have proven themselves in the military as well. This first slide is of a real ASK-21 takeoff and tow. Don will be manipulating the slides as I provide the descriptions. We've just seen the mini desktop system. Now we're going to start through the maneuvers. This is a takeoff at the Chicago Glider Club. Later we'll follow it with a sim of the same thing. This slide and the next are intended to show you the similarities and differences of the real flight and the simulator flight. I'm not trying to teach you how to instruct, but rather how a simulator can be an invaluable tool to add to the actual in-flight training. Here we're seeing the tow. We'll shortly see, there we see the tow plane beginning to turn. The next slide is of the simulator takeoff and tow from the same airport. This is the downloaded local airport simulation that we'll talk more about later. This is a view from the pilot seat of the main screen, which is the larger screen on the right, with a partial view of the screen on the left side, showing that the pilot can turn his head and see what's going on that side if he needs to. Okay, the tow pilot is now dropping down and he's waving us off, and he's taken off to the left. We've released and we're heading off to the right. Our experience at the Chicago Club has shown that the skills are readily transferred in both directions between the simulator and the real flight and gliders. That is much less true with the tiny desktop controls that we showed you earlier, and that I think Don will show once more later. I use many shots in here that include the Chicago Glider Club's home field. The local landscapes are available for download and insertion into Condor. This helps students enormously with staying oriented when their sim glider is in the air, and that skill too will transfer well to the real world. Notice that the present screen, and here we're showing all three. If you look to the left, you can see some local landscape. The same is true in front, and the same is true to the right side. We can take advantage of that as instructors to point out local landmarks, the lake, the river, roads, particular farm fields, anything that stands out in your local airport, and point out its relative position to the home airport, which will make it easier for the new student to find his way around. That's typically a big problem for inexperienced students unless they have power experience in the same area. We can stop a Condor flight at any time by pressing the pause button. We can easily take time out for a discussion of the strengths and weaknesses of the picture and the situation in view. We then toggle the pause button once more to continue where we left off. In a rear glider, we don't, of course, have that opportunity. Our attention must always be on the safety of continued flight, which detracts from the value of the instruction, but it's an essential and cannot be shortcutted. Another situation that is possible and which we don't demonstrate here is the save flight and then refly that's frequently used to refresh both the students and the instructor's memory of maneuvers that need attention and clarification. The pause button is the most used sim tool on the Cumulus Soaring's accessory keyboard. The refresh and refly is directly in the Condor system and is very, very valuable to go over and, as I said, remind you of where the weaknesses are, where the strengths are, and what needs further review and clarification. Okay, in the landing pattern, whether it's right or left traffic, we have a screen available so that the pilot can see the runway. He can align parallel to the runway and note when he's at his aiming point and properly fly the pattern. If he is sitting in the seat, and this photograph is taken from behind the seat, if he's sitting in the seat, he's very close to the control stick in the center of the picture. He'll see only the front screen if his head is pointed forwards. But if he needs to see something to the side, just like in the air, he turns his head to the side, sees the screen on the left or right, and knows where he is relative to his position over the ground. If you teach at a busy airport, right patterns might be impossible, but a student has to be comfortable with them as well, because in the future, he likely will run into an airport that has a right traffic pattern. He may, in an off-field landing situation, need a right pattern. We might not be able to do that at most airports, but we can do it on the simulator anytime we wish. We also encourage the pilots to look right and left before every maneuver, just as in the air, to make sure they're clear of traffic. Rumors have it that some traffic will be brought into the Condor program at the next iteration, but we have no verification of that. Let's go on to patterns and landings. Here we have, in the very center of this picture, we see the Chicago Glider Club airstrip. And in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see the little note. The satellite imagery is all from Google Earth, but the local area, we have help from the soaringtools.org, who create the local area scenery, also from Google Earth, which we've used exclusively here at Chicago Glider Club. We're going to show some stalls. We'll show approach to stalls with recovery, which is needed for commercial pilot instruction. We'll show complete stalls, which is required for private pilot instruction. Flight instructor students have to do both. Now we see the pilot has his nose raised just slightly above the horizon, and we see that the airspeed is dropping. The airspeed isn't showing. There it is. There it goes. It's down. 32. And there the pilot has recovered by dropping the nose a little bit. The definition of the best recovery from a stall is minimum loss of altitude, and that's exactly what was done. Now here the pilot is slowing down again, and it's showing a real stall. Note the nose well above the horizon, and the plane drops sharply on its own. But again, by releasing back pressure, the pilot has recovered by permitting the plane to regain enough speed and reduce the angle of attack such that he is back in normal flight, minimum loss of altitude. Okay, this is one more
with the simulator
exhibition of the stalls, this time in the simulator not in the real glider. And you'll see how similar it is. Okay, the speed dropped down. The pilot dropped the nose a little bit by releasing back pressure, and he's now back to normal speed. Now we have the pause here to point out that we can discuss that if it needed, as we can do at any time we choose when on the simulator. And here we're back in action. The nose is raised well above the horizon, and it drops even though the pilot has full back pressure at the moment of drop. And again, he recovered by releasing the back pressure, picking up enough speed and reducing the angle of attack such that he is now back in normal flight. Incidentally, when students do things well, as Don has done here, it's important that you encourage and compliment your student. A good approach to teaching, no matter what the maneuver, is even if you have to talk the student through it, when he does well, compliment him, make him happy. A good result creates a positive attitude towards instruction and greatly improves the likelihood that that student will stick with instruction and come back for more. And here the miracle button can be very helpful, as you'll see soon. Here we're approaching the pattern on a 45-degree approach. Now this is real flight. The glider has turned now to downwind leg, and he's flying straight parallel to the runway. I'm turning the camera to the side to show that he's downwind, following parallel to the runway, which the student could do in the glider, but not on a single screen simulator. Retaining the base leg. And there's the runway on the left side of the screen. Seems to move to the center as the glider turns towards it. And the glider is aligning with the center of the runway. Some of those tall trees you see, I've moved with the help of a chainsaw. And now we're landing straight ahead at Chicago Glider Club. Turning off to the right to make room for other traffic. Right. Now we'll see the approach and landing on the simulator. Here, I'm showing two screens, not because the pilot can see the two screens. He'll only see the larger screen on the right. The left screen will only be in his plane of vision if he turns his head to the left. But for our purposes here, first, encouraging use of the simulator, I wanted to show both. The glider is flying parallel to the runway, which happens to be parallel to the plowed field on the left. Here we can see the altimeter. Pilot is turning left. It happens to be about 400 feet. Airspeed is about 60, is down to 300 feet. You can clearly see the approach area of the runway on the left. As he comes down to 200 feet, he is lining up with the runway, straightening out. And on the simulator, my chainsaw didn't work on the trees. And here John is showing us his great proficiency with the simulator with a rather light touch on landing. There we are, we're on the ground. I reiterate, encourage your students through their successes to feel good about themselves. nothing encourages them more, makes them happier, and makes them more likely to come back repeatedly to finish it up and stay with us. Now we're going to show a pattern where the glider on the simulator is too low. Look now that we're still on downwind leg and we're at 400 feet. And actually, if you look over at the one right, you see how flat it looks. You don't need the altimeter to tell you we're too low. We're down to 300 feet. We still haven't turned base leg. The student flying here hasn't corrected. He doesn't use the angular change that's possible on great leg, on base leg, to get closer to the runway. He's flying straight, and look what's happening to the speed. He's noticed that he's getting too low and lower and lower, and the speed starts to deteriorate, and it's getting down further. We're down to 100 feet, and we haven't turned. We're just starting to turn. Speed's falling apart. He's skidding, and what happens? That's what happens. I don't regard that as encouraging the student, but sometimes you have to tell them like it is. This is the flight screen from the last flight repeated, showing only one screen, and shows how poorly he really would have any awareness of where he is. We're repeating this same thing over again. You don't even see the runway. Whereas with the two-screen view, by turning to the left, you'd see readily that you're too low too soon. Soaring Safety Foundation has some good safety videos on this subject too. Miracle button. Here, I'm going to show you a situation where the miracle button is very used. We're back to two-screen view, and I'd remind you that the pilot is only seeing the main screen. Now we're too low, and we just jumped up to 3,000 feet. We'll have to go back and show that jump again because I got behind it talking. Okay, here we're at 1,500. Watch the altimeter. We hit the miracle button, and bing, there it goes. We're at 3,000 feet. If the student pilot were disoriented, we're having problems of some kind, we can repeat his entry to pattern, his pattern itself, anything up to the point where he's actually rolling on the ground, hit the miracle button, and gain 1,500 feet. That's useful for repetitive training, for stalls, for steep turns, for turns to heading, for anything at all where the student needs extra time. We're now on a screen. This is a fixed slide, which shows setting some of the weather factors to fly in. We actually change this entirely on the compass in the center. If you put your mouse on the arrow, you can lengthen it and you can turn it to the wind direction and strength you want. When you do it, the new direction and speed will show up in the boxes on the left. I think I can show you these with the arrow here. This can be turned and it can be lengthened to change it. The numbers show up here. You can't change the numbers with the keypad. It has to be done on the compass rose. The compass variation will show up over here, and the weather is a custom preset.
As I mentioned before, being a Condor skeptic, I had it on my home computer through Condor 1 and then Condor 2, and I could never spend more than 10 or 15 minutes before I decided it was a not great video game, and I would move on to do other things. The situation was similar at the Chicago Glider Club. We still have Condor 1 on the computer there, and in the almost decade that it's been there, I haven't seen a single minute of real instruction happen. And I know it. I do know it works. I know that I've talked to several people that have trained with Scott on minimalistic equipment, and working one-on-one, it's obvious that he can make it work. There are great success stories of people who've trained with him and then gone out and got their glider certificate. However, having been exposed to a sit-in simulator in December, things changed for me, and the mandate from the SSA to get involved with this, I took it pretty seriously. And on this slide, you'll see on the left is the first iteration of the SSA's soaring simulator. And this was taken down at the Highland Airport, where the St. Louis Soaring Association has a simulator. It's shown on the right of that photograph. That was built before there were commercially available simulators, and Jim St. Clair built it. He included 3 very large televisions, 43-inch televisions, but it did certainly provide a surround view of the pilot. He also, it's hard to see, but he's also added a manual trim lever. The SSA simulator started out as a just soaring simulator sold by Wings and Wheels, and it used push buttons for the trim. I like a manual trim lever better. This is a picture of our SSA chairman flying the St. Louis Soaring Association's Condor simulator. And again, I think this gives you a good view of how massive those televisions are. The interesting thing is that a television costs almost nothing compared to a gaming monitor. They are big, so you can get some surround. I have seen 3 monitor setups that the monitors are far enough away from you that you can't get that surround feeling. And so you can see the wingtips in your peripheral vision. You don't have to turn your head at all, which is not what we're looking for. If this camera had been in front of the seat rather than behind it, you would get a much better look at what happens with the surrounding. These are televisions. These are 40-inch televisions. I purchased these right before we went to Oshkosh. In the previous 2 slides back, you'll see the young man on the left has a head tracking unit on his head. I tried both Oculus and a head tracker. I kind of like the head tracker, but what we discovered at St. Louis was just getting people in and out of the simulators and occasionally having to rework the head tracker so it was actually giving you the view you wanted. That became awkward. Going to Oshkosh, I decided that we had to dispense with those, and we got ourselves 3 televisions, and we also got a manual trim lever, which you can see. The arrow on the sign is almost pointing towards it. It's the green knob on that throttle quadrant that was added. Here's the simulator actually at Oshkosh, one of our first day participants. If I was smarter, I'd be sitting in the chair, which will fit in that position where I'm now kneeling. But during the week of Oshkosh, we flew over 300 flights. Some people that had never flown a glider, some people that had never flown an airplane, some people that were high time in both. But we went through the week with a great success. There were very few times when the simulator wasn't occupied. Scott Manley was a big help in taking over several hours each day so I could walk around and spend money. This is a slightly better picture. It still doesn't show the surround effect the way it ought to, but it does show the 3 television screens. And again, they are quite cost effective as compared to a high performance monitor. The first time I looked at them, I was a little afraid that they were not a high enough resolution to give us what we were looking for. And I was pleased when I discovered that 1080 vertical pixels is plenty. And it's also a little bit easier on the graphics cards to provide pictures like this rather than if I had 3 high buck monitors here. Let's see. So again, just another picture of the simulator as it currently exists. The structure is primarily from Just Soaring. Again, Wings and Wheels distributes them. They're made out of heavy-duty aluminum extrusions. It's called 80/20. I don't know why. It's available in both metric and American sizes. There's a lot of very interesting hardware to bolt together. You can see the slots where you can push T-nuts in there. They also, on the picture on the right, there's a yellow box around a very interesting and clever fastener that they have for joining these extrusions in 90 degrees relationships. Now, there's a warning that the people who build these things say, you know, don't grab onto the monitors or the monitor uprights because they aren't built for that. Well, so I added 2 gussets, 1 on each side, 4 screws on each side, and it makes this joint tremendously stiff. The photo on the right-hand side shows the grab handle that I put at the top of that upright, so that at Oshkosh, people had a very definite path to follow and could stabilize themselves with the grab handle. We had no failures at Oshkosh, not with the electronics, not with the controls, not with the framework. These are those clever fasteners that I was talking about. It's very cute the way they work. These extrusions come with these holes pre-machined in them, and the fasteners do a good job of holding it together, except, as you'll notice, especially the one down at the bottom, it's already starting to come loose a little bit. So that's why the gussets seemed appropriate, and they seem to be working very well. The other thing that I bought was the 3-screen modification kit, and you can see that part of that, the horizontal piece of 80/20 in the picture on the left, shows that that extrusion that's meant to hold a relatively small monitor as compared to my 40-inch big TVs. So it was necessary to add vertical support legs, and the 2x2 1/8-inch aluminum I had laying around the house. I added a very simple adjustment at the bottom of it, as shown in the right-hand picture. Makes it very sturdy, and has worked well since Oshkosh. There's a picture at the back of it. Because of the size of these screens, I was able to salvage one of the pieces that came off of the back of the stock structure, and to make it all work, I just put very simple joiner plates on and didn't have to buy anything else other than the triple screen kit. Again, had the aluminum laying around, and it was plenty easy to find T-nuts to bolt that all together. Moving right along, controls. To make a simulator as realistic as I could, I needed a control stick. I wanted a control stick that had the same length between the pivot point and the handle as an ASK-21. I also wanted it to have the same overall travel. An ASK-21, an AS-33, an AS-31H, all have about the same throw. Apparently Schleicher likes 4 inches of travel, 4 aft, left and right. With a 150 millimeter extension, I have that same throw and pivot length as an ASK-21. The stick has also been relocated about 5 inches forward from where it originally was. It puts it in a more realistic position to simulate the real glider. And the other thing it does is it makes it much easier to get in and out of the simulator without sitting on the stick. You can see on the left that the original position for the stick is way back here in the seat cutout. 5 inches forward is a more realistic position. And on the right, you can see that if a person backs up and puts his legs against the seat, he no longer has to worry about sitting on the stick because it's not behind him anymore. The rudder pedals, replacing the standard rudder pedals with the VKB pedals, give you more adjustment. There's a cam you can use in a couple different ways, and there's a spring that's adjustable so that you can get a feel that's perhaps more like in the gliders. The red arrow is pointing to a couple 5mm threaded coupling nuts that I added to the system to get the pedals more upright. These pedals were originally built apparently for putting under the desk where the movement of your feet on the rudder pedals is mostly up and down. In this simulator or in a glider, the movement of your rudder actuating feet is mostly fore and aft. And again, those were 25 cents a piece at the hardware store. Also with the simulator, and probably with any control system you use on Condor, there is a place where you can adjust the input, and you'll see that the ailerons with this joystick, you only have to flatten the line a little or curve the line a little bit, the elevator a little bit more curved. You'll see how incredibly dumbed down I have the travel for the rudder pedals. If you, these all come with the control set up so that the movement in Condor they think is linear with the movement of the control. And again, the rudders on this were extremely too sensitive, and you can see how much I had to put a curve in there so that a tiny movement of the rudder didn't give you a very hectic movement on the simulator. The other thing that I've previously mentioned, but I want to show here, very reasonably priced Logitech throttle quadrant. I had to paint the knob green to match the trim lever in our ASK21, but now I have a manual trim lever. So instead of monkeying around with buttons and trying to push buttons until it felt about right, I can grab the lever and very quickly decide whether I'm headed the right direction or not. It's a very sensitive control, so the movements are small, but it's much more, it feels much more like a real glider than pushing the buttons did. Oh, one of the other features that doesn't affect the flying much, but certainly affected the way I was using it, is I built a larger shelf. You can see that the silver anodized aluminum shelf on top here, that's what comes stock with this simulator. And it was just exactly the right size for me to put a keyboard on it and then knock it off with my elbow every time I got into the simulator. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a larger shelf that bolts on both at the back and the front. It's much more stable. It has enough room for the computer keyboard, for the Cumulus Soaring keyboard that's at the left front of that shelf. It's very handy, especially for flying cross country. For instruction, the two buttons that get used the most are the pause and the miracle button. There's also room for the mouse. And the shelf looks like expensive carbon fiber, but in reality, it's just a hunk of aluminum that was left over, wrapped with this 3M wrap film. Another picture of the hardware and the extrusion. My buddy Jim Davis is the hand model in this photograph on the right-hand side, and you can see that his elbow, his arm, and the mouse are all playing nicely. And that's the end of my presentation, except I did want to address the VR goggle thing. And I have flown with the Oculus and didn't like it for a couple of reasons. And I've watched our CFIGs fly with it too. For a couple of them, it makes them airsick. I had problems with the resolution. It was grainy compared to even our television monitors. I also watched people fumbling around trying to find controls. On our Mach 0.1 simulator, the release knob is fairly far forward, and I would watch people swipe at it a half a dozen times before I would finally pull it for them. With the Oculus, when you're training, you lose track of the reality around you. With the 3-screen monitor, you have enough vision to be able to find the airport, to find clouds, whatever you're looking for. And you also are still in touch with all the controls and don't have to flop around with your hands trying to find them. The other thing that I found at Oshkosh was some people needed a substantial amount of coaching to get them to a successful landing, which with coaching, some people needed none, some people needed a lot. But of the 300 people that flew it, a huge percentage of those made a successful landing on their first attempt in the simulator. A real advantage of not having 3D goggles on it is you can point to something and they can see what you're pointing at. Good news with Condor is there's an input screen where you can assign almost anything to almost any button. And so the default setup to start or end a flight is supposed to be the escape key. But since I had those 3 buttons, to me, green means go and red means stop. So the starting the flight is a green button and ending the flight is the red button. The Warthog is a easily available stick in the US. There are fancier things. I've since had a chance to fly with them. I'm still convinced the Warthog is the best buck, the best
for the buck.
For the buck, yes. It's and the extension is a 150 millimeter extension. There are lots of sources on Amazon for those, and I was enamored with the idea of an extension and perhaps needing a stiffer spring with the extension. And so I bought from a gentleman in Poland. The stuff was very well made. The freight was very expensive. So, but again, 150 millimeters, and Googling Warthog extension comes up with an awful lot of information. I was surprised. I'm not sure. I'm guessing maybe not.
We needed 6 by 7 feet for ours, I think.
Right, 6 foot deep and 7 foot wide, and ours is in a room that has a big angle on the corner that matches the screen because we had to build the room out into our hangar and we wanted to put all of our gliders in there still. So again, if you don't have 7 foot width, then 40-inch TVs aren't the answer. The best deal I found was on TCL 40-inch monitors, and I bought 2 sets of them now from Best Buy, and they not only work well, but they function well with just one remote controller pointing at them. They really have been excellent to use. So,
well, they're not called monitors; they're called TVs.
I'm sorry, they're TVs. TCL 40-inch televisions. When the SSA initiated this program to try to get more full-size simulators into clubs, I did a cost study, and with a pretty darn good computer, with the Soaring simulator, with a single gaming monitor with an Oculus and with a head tracker, it came in under $5,000. After I decided that for instruction, perhaps it was a better way to go with the 3 television screens, I redid it, and by leaving the head tracker and the Oculus off, and even with adding the new controls, it still came up to $5,000, which is why the SSA is authorizing grants of up to $2,500 to pay for half of that complete system.